This is Marco Reus.
This is Shinji Kagawa.
This is Nuri Shahin.
Hello, this is Jaden Sancho.
And you're listening to the Yellowwall podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 500 of the Yellowwallpod. I'm your host Stefan Butzko, and today we will talk about a team that is among Europe's top 8. However, it is struggling to keep outside the Bundesliga bottom 8. 27 points of first place Bayern, 10 points of third place Frankfurt, and 4 points of the Europa League spots. That is what we're dealing with right now, a team that does not make sense, and since it is the 500th episode, I don't know what it all would ever change. But nevertheless, here we are, 11 years into the show, episode 500. And sorry that we didn't get it out sooner. But first of all, it felt like shitty to not do it at the back of a win. And second of all, I think we just had a lot of scheduling issues between vacation, sickness, children being rushed to the doctor, and work. So here we finally are, and I'm joined by Lars Palman. Hello, Lars. How are you doing?
Hello, Stefan. I'm surprised because I'm usually second in your list.
Okay, Lars is surprised. I don't know if Matthias Zug is also surprised, but also here, Matthias Zug. Hello, Matthias. How are you doing?
I am always surprised, but no, I am doing well, Stefan. But I need to correct you, actually.
Oh, no.
We're coming up on 13 years of the Yellow Wall.
13?
Yes, because it was August, September of 2012 was the inaugural episode.
That's true, but I stopped counting after 10 years in my head to not be too confronted with my own mortality. But you're right, it is 13 years. All right. That is a very long time. It's crazy how much work we've put into this show over the years. I mean, right now it's obviously a little bit less than in previous years, but I still look proudly on all the sort of work that we've put into this show, and it's great to have a sponsor for this episode. So shout out to Steve Berkowitz, who kindly donated to our Patreon for this episode. So thank you. And with that, I think we can talk about the weekend where, surprise, surprise, a center back is taking our corner kicks now and successfully doing so. Nico Schlotterbeck, I think he took, 3 corner kicks and 2 of them turned into goals. Lars, I saw you in Blue Sky be very surprised before it eventually came off good. What do you make of this 3-1 win against a team from the top 4 spots?
I think anyone pretending not to be surprised when Nico Schlotterbeck took a corner and was actually good is probably lying, because he's a center half and that just doesn't really happen. I mean, I racked my brain about who might have been the last one. The only center back I can think of who's ever taken set pieces of that sort would be Holger Badstuber at Bayern. That's obviously sort of a deep cut, so I'm not buying it if anyone tells me they saw Schlotterbeck going to the corner flag and thinking that's a good idea. If nothing else, also because Schlotterbeck is a pretty good header of the ball and obviously one of Dortmund's main targets for set pieces. So anyway, it's nice for them to score 2 goals on set pieces, and obviously also nice to win 3-1 against Mainz, who were on a real run. I think they were unbeaten in 6. Mainz obviously beat Dortmund earlier in the season. They also beat Bayern this year. They are the surprise team, still looking fairly strong for a Champions League spot. So handling them, I would say, relatively comfortably. Not necessarily what I expected from Dortmund, just because we've seen so much shit from them this season. The game itself, I would argue not the greatest quality, but that also can be a positive when we're looking at Dortmund, because they basically neutralized Mainz's strengths for, let's say, 70 of the 90 minutes. I think there was a spell in the second half when the intensity levels dropped a little bit and they didn't hold on to the ball very well for, 15, 20 minutes. But overall, I think one of the strongest performances in the Bundesliga this season, which obviously isn't saying too much, but nice coming out of the international break, gaining some momentum. But obviously the question is how much that will be worth, considering they are going into the Englische Woche of hell with away games at Freiburg, at Barcelona, at Bayern Munich. I think this is pretty much the week that is going to define if there's anything to play for the rest of the year. Well, the rest of the season, I should say.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they are qualified for the Club World Cup, so maybe they'll do well there. However, it's... I think overall, you're right. Looking at this performance, I think we can be fairly happy with it. Matthias, do you have any thoughts on our new corner kick taker?
Well, I mean, like everybody, it was surprise, listening to the post-match press conference. The journalists also admitted their surprise. And, Kovac basically acknowledged that, yes, it would be a surprise to everyone. But he did his job obviously very well. And those were not just very well placed corners, but just the pace that they come in, to kind of echo Las's deep cut. Badstuber began his career also as a fullback before moving into central defense. So he had to learn to cross. Schlotterbeck, not really known for good quality crossing, but he's got a pretty decent long range shot on him. So it was probably just something they were like, hey, let's try this out during practice. And they were able to repeat good results and went, hey, let's throw this in there. In general, I'm not a huge fan if one of your best headers of the ball is not in a goal-scoring position on a set piece like an indirect free kick or a corner, kind of like, Werder Bremen not utilizing Marvin Duksch in the middle at times, but instead having him take those types of set pieces as well, where I'm like, it just doesn't sit perfectly for me. But it was worth a try, and obviously it paid off. I think overall, Schlotterbeck, aside from 2 corner assists, had a very, very good game.
Yeah. Right now, I think he might be a candidate for player of the season. So I think, honestly, he's as we know, suspended for the game against Freiburg. However, I for now would actually stick with him because I like the corners that he's taking. I mean, the amount of whip that he gets on them and the pace. I think Maxi Bayer's header really paid tribute to that, when you just need to make contact and sort of the pace of the cross itself is enough to generate enough power to beat the goalkeeper. I mean, the ball really hit, like, I want to say maybe 30, 40 centimeters above Sentner's face. So a slower paced shot surely would have been savable. So yeah, I'm content with it, even though the drawback is, of course, that you would like him as a target in the box. But I mean, if Maxi Bayer, who, is maybe not as good of a header as Schlotterbeck, I don't still makes something like that out of it. I'm okay with it, and want to see if Dortmund can replicate this sort of corner taking in the future, because scoring from set pieces will obviously greatly help them, especially in the games coming up that you just mentioned, Lars, because I don't know how much else out of open play Dortmund will generate, because under Kovac I still think this is one of the glaring weaknesses, that very little is being created. But nevertheless, I think we should talk a little bit about the formation, because it was 3 players at the back with Schlotterbeck, Can and Anton, and we had Brandt in behind 2 strikers with Maxi Bayer and Adeyemi. I thought overall that this approach really helped Dortmund. Matthias, how did you like the switches that we saw from the lineup? Now, maybe it was a similar lineup to the Leipzig game because I honestly haven't seen that. But it is uncommon for Dortmund to play with 3 at the back. I mean, we tried it earlier, I think, against Werder Bremen with Nuri Sahin, but other than that, Dortmund have played with the back 4 for most of the season so far. And of course, the Adeyemi Bayer combination at the front, I also think is a strong lineup that suits both these players.
Yeah, I mean, I'll discount the weird 3 at the back against Bremen under Sahin because there were decisions in the lineup that just simply didn't make sense, in my opinion. I think one thing we've seen over the last few weeks, overall, Emre Can playing decently when he's allowed to play in one position for a long period of time, and gaining comfort with it. Having a 3 at the back with Anton next to him, and Anton has also started to regain confidence. You kind of mitigate some of the weaknesses from John's play whilst kind of highlighting some of his strengths, like his ability to drive forward a little bit, carry the ball as well as his pace and recovery speed. So I think that actually makes sense. This is one of the better, and that's not saying much, performances I saw from Julian Brandt this season, who overall, for me, is in the top 3 of most disappointing players this season. Adeyemi, I thought, played well, and Bayer and Adeyemi were able to combine off each other because Bayer also isn't that lone target man type. So I feel like you said, this played to both those players' strengths. I think, Guirassy obviously wasn't available for this match, but when he is available, I think he can also play well in this type of setup. So I think overall, not bad. Ideally, I still wouldn't play Kuto if my life depended on it. Because it wasn't his worst performance, but he had one just horrendous giveaway where I'm like, that was completely unnecessary, and that was on a dribble as well. Now, part of the problem is obviously he wasn't given many options to pass a ball, but in an ideal scenario, he's not getting a start anyway. So I'd put him as also a top 3 disappointment, but I had much lower expectations of him coming into the season than, say, a Julian Brandt. So, no, it obviously played to Dortmund's strengths, and defeating a team that was as hot as Mainz, on form with, just full of confidence, especially after, a disappointing loss to Leipzig, which I don't think Dortmund deserved to lose, and just a head-scratcher, typical Augsburg loss. This was exactly what was needed and hopefully can lead to something. Now, I do think what Lasse says is true, that this is going to be kind of 2 weeks of hell for Dortmund. Freiburg, a little bit inconsistent. Obviously, twice Barcelona and once Bayern. That's going to be, that could just completely rob them of any confidence whatsoever if they, ship, 15 goals in 3 matches, which, when they are playing as badly as they have been this season, is a distinct possibility. And so hopefully that won't happen.
Yeah, I'm hoping to. Lars, what do you make of the lineup changes?
I think Niko Kovac has basically toyed with the idea of going to the 3-man backline for the entirety of his 2 months at Dortmund. He, as a coach, his history is basically mostly successful with a back line of 3 center halves. Even though the funny thing is that when he won the cup with Frankfurt, upsetting Bayern in the cup final, he actually went from a back 3 to a back 4 to surprise Bayern, to great effect, obviously. But I wasn't surprised, especially considering that Marcel Sabitzer is out, Metscher only coming back now for the Freiburg game, so there's no ball-playing defensive midfielder available to them, and I don't know how much faith they would have in Salih Özcan being a large part of the build-up situation. And then obviously also Zero Girassi was a relatively sudden miss with his muscle problems after the international break. So given that Bayer has struggled whenever put up front as the lone striker this season, I think that was also part of the equation, that you can put him next to Adeyemi, both players who aren't out and out number 9s, but I think are like these secondary strikers, and having two of them offer all the deep runs and a lot of work rate against the ball. That all made a decent amount of sense. So what I would also say is that I still maintain that Dortmund's squad is actually set up quite nicely to play this regularly, because obviously they've invested quite a bit in central defense with Anton coming in this season, Schlotterbeck, Can and Süle. You can almost always, I mean, we'll come to it with the Freiburg game, but almost always put 3 of those on the pitch at the same time. And then Matthias already talked about Kuto, who I also was disappointed in this game, because this is supposed to be like the role he's actually good at. I don't know. I just think he needs to completely rebuild confidence over the summer. The short summer for Dortmund, obviously, with the Club World Cup, but I think this season is a write-off for him. But I would expect them to keep up with this formation if they can in the following games, because I think it gives them a level of stability in both defensively, which for the most part has been fine under Kovac, regardless of formation, but also gives them a clear structure and build-up, which is especially important until Mecha comes back and can take on a bit more of the responsibility in build-up situations, because you don't want Salih Özcan to have like 100 touches of the ball in a game. I think that's pretty much a recipe for disaster, and they kind of mitigated that issue going with the back 3. And I kind of feel like the formation change helped them in a way that they beat Mainz with like Mainz's own characteristics. So they played very intensely. They did a lot of dirty work off the ball. They pressed reasonably well, which we can't usually say about Dortmund this season. And then, they were more clinical with their chances than they usually are. Obviously, scoring 2 set pieces helps, but also the combination between Brandt, Bayer, and Adeyemi for the first goal, which was also kind of the first real scoring opportunity in the game for Dortmund. And we all know how feeble they've been this season. So if they don't score that first one and maybe Mainz score a cheap goal off a set piece or whatever, like the entire complexion of the game is changed. So I would like that for them to keep this formation going, but as I've alluded to now a couple of times, personnel might prohibit them from doing so against Freiburg.
Yeah, but first of all, before we move to Freiburg, I just want to shout out, because you just talked about the intensity, Charlie Özcan, who I thought had a really good game, really sort of put his strengths into that game. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Dortmund actually did outrun Mainz over the course of the game.
4 kilometers.
And yeah, which is actually rare this season. And I think one of the biggest problems that Dortmund have is the fitness level of this team. And to display the performance they did against Mainz is, I don't know if I wanted to say surprising, but it is at least encouraging. Obviously, Dortmund will not be able to replicate this consistently because of the sort of the groundwork that they did not put in at the beginning of the season for various reasons. Obviously, that's something that Niko Kovac just can't make up for in the amount of time that he has now, and something that Dortmund will have to deal with. But nevertheless, at least for one game, it was nice to actually outwork an opponent, and it's obviously something you would like to see more often. And I think Charlie Özcan was part of that equation in a big way. So shout out to him, because obviously he was loaned out to Wolfsburg, and to come in any role and still be of a formidable help, I think is something where he deserves some credit for. So there's that. But yeah, as you just said, when we look forward to the Freiburg game, Schlotterbeck is suspended after the 5th booking, and Emre Can and Niklas Süle both did not train, I think, until at least not until today, which is Thursday. So maybe, I don't know, I've not listened to the news conference yet, but maybe they will train tomorrow. Last, I don't know if you have heard more, but it appears as though the back 3 formation might turn into a back 1 formation.
Yeah, Niklas Süle, I don't even know when, because he only was on the pitch for a few minutes, but he picked up a hematoma, which apparently is quite painful for him. I don't know exactly the spot on the body, but Niklas Süle has enough body to for that to hurt, I guess. So he hasn't trained with the team so far. I think Kovac is optimistic that he can do some work on Friday, but obviously then they don't really do too much of an intense session on, a traveling day, with Freiburg being the longest travel of the season, I'm pretty sure, at least in the Bundesliga, obviously. And with Can struggled with the adductors already during the game against Mainz. There was like a brief moment where it looked like Niklas Süle was getting ready for getting substituted on, but Emre Can said, you know what, I can deal with the pain or whatever it was until the end of the game. But he also has trained with the team, so there's, I guess, a non-zero chance that, as you mentioned or alluded to, Waldemar Anton is the only one left standing, with Schlotterbeck suspended and Can and Süle both injured. So that's also why Niko Kovac wasn't committing to sticking with the 3-man back line, which I think, if either Can or Süle can play, would be Anton, that guy, and Bensebaini on the left, who makes the most sense as the replacement for Schlotterbeck. But if both can't go, then it's going to be one of those makeshift defensive lines with, I would presume, a back 4 of Riasson, Anton, Bensebaini and Svensson, which, I mean, Freiburg haven't been great in the last few weeks. So if there's a game during this spell, especially, where that might not be the worst thing, obviously you would rather have it against Freiburg than Barcelona or Bayern, because as Matthias said, they might well put 5 beyond you regardless of who plays in defense. So at least you have a fighting chance, I would assume, at Freiburg, but still it's not a great situation. And also, just to put a bow on it, Serhou Guirassy still hasn't trained with the team either, but Kovac was optimistic that he can be available for selection, but I'm fairly certain that they are not going to rush him back into the starting 11, considering how well Adeyemi and Bayer played together. And Felix Metscher is also supposed to be back in the squad, but certainly not available from, the first minute in his first game back since January the 25th, I think.
Yeah, it's been a while. Honestly, I don't think I would break up the Adeyemi-Bayer combination just yet, especially if Guirassy isn't 100%. I'd then keep him rather as a substitute and see if he maybe can change the structure of the game if need be. But I would like to see more of the Adeyemi-Bayer partnership, because we just talked about the good pressing against Mainz. Maximilian Bayer has an amazing work rate, and they're both just simply faster than Guirassy, and I think they have utilized that well in pressing Mainz, and I feel like the same will probably hold true for the Freiburg game. Yeah, and as far as you said about Bensebaini slotting in a bit more centrally in defense, I think he's playing that position for his national team anyway, so...
And did it quite a bit for Gladbach as well, sorry.
Yeah, so the hope is that he is not going to look entirely out of place, but Bensebaini also has not played too much recently, so I think a lack of rhythm will be there. So it's going to be a bit of a high wire act. Matthias, what do you expect from this game against Freiburg, who I think are 4 points ahead of Dortmund currently in the table? So Kovac has said that in terms of stability and consistency, a win is an absolute must. Will it be one though?
Well, in theory, the advantage. I mean, Freiburg do not score a lot of goals, but neither do Augsburg, and we know how that ended. So,
or Kiel for that matter.
Yeah, or Kiel for that matter. Freiburg's defense is roughly as solid or lack thereof as Dortmund's, only having given up 2 less goals than Dortmund. So, and they've been a little bit inconsistent, but overall still quite good. I think taking a win against Mainz, though, at home and translating that to a win at Freiburg, I think is absolutely possible. Am I confident Dortmund will do that? No. Because how can anybody have confidence in Dortmund this season when you never know what's going to happen? Like, who's going to show up? There's just no consistency. This is their time to prove that and get some consistency. And granted, not having Schlotterbeck, I think, is actually a huge loss. A huge loss. So they have a lot to prove in this one. I think if they get a draw against Freiburg, I'd actually kind of be happy as a result goes, which that in itself is kind of a damning statement, but symbolic of the season, I'd say.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I have very little expectations for a Dortmund game on the road to begin with, and especially if Dortmund have won the recent game. How many games, Bundesliga games in a row have Dortmund managed to win? Like, how many back-to-back wins were there? I remember one. Last, was there another?
No,
where
that was the first one against Union and St. Pauli, and they've chased that high now for, I guess, another month.
So yeah, that really tells us everything we need to know about the season. And especially with the Barcelona game coming up, I would not be surprised if the focus was elsewhere, because this Dortmund team likes to cherry pick for the Champions League, even though their Champions League campaign this season certainly hasn't been as good performance-wise as the previous one. But we'll see how it goes against Barcelona, I guess. But my expectations for that is currently is they're going to be shellacked by a very strong Barcelona team. And it's going to be another makeshift team that will play against Freiburg. Granted, the players itself should have the quality to compete well against Freiburg, but my confidence in them having chemistry and finding ways to break down Freiburg and even dominate the game is very low. So yeah, Matthias, I don't know if you want to already move on, and I also don't know if you watched the games between Barcelona and Atletico recently in the Copa del Rey, because I thought they were a little, I guess a little bit interesting, even though I've not seen much of it, but just a few minutes here and there on, I think, ESPN Plus or whatever it was, which is why I switched it on. But what do you make of the Champions League opponent that Dortmund will face? Is it Tuesday or Wednesday?
Wednesday.
Well, what do I make of it? Obviously, easy.
For Barcelona.
I don't know. It's not. I mean, it's Barcelona. They are top of La Liga right now. Only 3 points clear of Real Madrid, but having scored exactly 20 more goals than Real Madrid. I mean, they've scored 82 goals in 29 matches. That's a pretty good goal scoring rate. And they've only allowed 28. Now, I will say that outside of maybe the top 2 or 3, La Liga is pretty weak. It's gotten weaker and weaker as the years have gone on. Some venerable favorites are not doing well and struggling mightily. So, the challenge outside of Real Madrid and Atletico tends to not be there on the day-to-day for Barcelona. But be that as it may, they don't mess around. Like they're not really taking it easy against anybody. And I'll be honest, it seems like a little bit of a Hansi Flick redemption arc after his stint with Germany, which obviously was not that. And Barcelona are extremely good, extremely dangerous. And as much of an optimistic homer as I am for Dortmund, I don't think Dortmund have a chance against Barcelona. Not like a realistic one in terms of maybe they could not lose one leg, but over the course of two legs, I think Barcelona are just so much better that they will win. And I honestly think they're going to win pretty comfortably.
Yep, my prediction is that this tie will be over before the second leg, because I think, as per usual, Robert Lewandowski will score at least 2 against Dortmund, and someone else will, and that will probably be that. Lars, I don't know if you have more optimism to share, but if I realistically look at how cultured Barcelona are playing right now, how much of a groove they are in versus how much Dortmund aren't in a groove. I only see one outcome here.
Well, as ever, I am the optimist in our group, I suppose. First of all, Robert Lewandowski did absolutely nothing in the first meeting of the season in December. He was subbed off, and then Ferran Torres actually scored the brace that won the game for Barcelona. So count your blessings, I suppose. I think the game in December is probably not very useful for us, because that was kind of weird how that all went. I mean, Dortmund scored.
Yeah, I haven't even brought it up.
Dortmund scored from a dumb penalty given away by Kubasi, an individual mistake, I would say, from Iñaki Peña, the backup goalkeeper. And then Dortmund gave a draw away when Pascal Groß played a ball into no man's land, and Jamie Gittens, for whatever reasons, decided not to pick up a booking for a professional foul. So obviously that game is quite different to playing this Barcelona when it's a quarterfinal, and Barcelona in 21 games in this calendar year won 18, drawn 3, so they haven't lost. They just went into the Metropolitano and beat Atletico 1-0, but could have been, a bigger scoreline. I think from what I've seen, the flow of the game was fairly comfortably in Barcelona's favor. I struggle to see a way for Dortmund to withstand that attacking firepower for 180 minutes. But if we want to be positive about it, I think we probably had the same thought quite a few times in the Champions League over the last few years. And usually in these games where Dortmund were the absolute underdog, it wasn't like they were comprehensively beaten. I mean, we remember meetings, obviously, last season with PSG, where the crossbar also helped, but still Dortmund won both semi-final games. We remember games against Manchester City when Dortmund always looked competitive. I'm not saying they are going to make it to the semi-finals or whatever, just because, going by, the form book or whatever, I think Barcelona are probably the favorites to win the entire competition right now, not just, make it past Dortmund. But I also would say that I can see a pathway to the game still being, or the tie at least being, respectable, which I suppose the way you guys have been talking about it, I think that's probably a predominant thought among a lot of fans, coming away from this tie and it's being like a 3-1 overall for Barcelona, a 4-2 overall for Barcelona. I think that would probably be considered a reasonable result given where the two teams are this season. And I think I can see a pathway to that sort of scoreline. But if I'm being entirely honest, I also wouldn't be surprised if the game in Barcelona, the first leg, was such a comprehensive beatdown of Dortmund that they usually only get a few days later in Munich.
Yeah, that is sort of my expectation. So I'm really not looking forward to this FCB week, if you want to call it this, at all. I think the best chance of a result is probably in Munich, and that says a lot. Maybe the home leg against Barcelona will look a little bit better for Dortmund, but that won't change much if they are still lose on aggregate, to be honest. So yeah, the hope really relies for me on sort of the partnership of maybe Adeyemi and Bayer, and them being very direct, because I think this is the way Dortmund have to play, and that is obviously a weapon that Dortmund have in their arsenal that they can deploy. But even then, even if Dortmund score a couple of goals, I don't think it's going to be enough, honestly. So yeah, we'll see what happens. I don't want to be too pessimistic, but my realistic view on this tie is that Barcelona are heavy favorites, and they would have to shoot themselves in the foot quite remarkably for Dortmund to have any chance of progressing out of this tie. My hope is that Dortmund make it respectable, and that you can still be proud of them even though they bow out of the Champions League for I don't know however many long. So I guess I will try to cherish it one way or another, because it might be a while until Dortmund play in the Champions League again, because I don't think they are going to make it to the top 4 in this season in Bundesliga, and I also don't think they will win the Champions League. So the avenues of qualifying for next season's Champions League feel very exhausted, and I don't know if the turnaround for next season or in the summer is going to be big enough to warrant that Dortmund then finish in the top 4. I don't know, Matthias, if you are more optimistic about the general outlook of this Dortmund side, but I currently feel like with Leverkusen being strong, with Frankfurt being strong, Bayern and maybe Leipzig make a recovery, I don't know. It's not going to be easy to be back into the top 4 consistently.
Well, consistently, if we're talking about that beyond this season, I think that's a discussion for a different day. As far as this season goes, I think Dortmund have every chance to make it to a European place. They're 4 points off 6th place, and Leipzig aren't exactly full of confidence. They had a little bit of change there at the top. So who knows what's going to come out of that. And the teams ahead of them, of course, Wolfsburg, Augsburg, and Freiburg. We'll kind of have to wait and see what happens. Gladbach, I'm not fully sold on yet. Mainz now has a chink in its armor a little bit. They lost to a mid-table club. That's pretty bad.
Losers
losing to a 10th. Ugh, gosh. Anyway, so do I think Dortmund could make the top 4? They have to go on quite a good run to make that happen. Do I think they're going to finish in the top 6? Yes, I actually do. I think there are going to be enough points dropped for the clubs ahead of them for them to kind of get there. It's not too dissimilar to Klopp's final season when, just at the end, they kind of limped into a Europa League spot and then had that really fun run in the Europa League with Thomas Tuchel. So, yeah, I think they'll make Europe. Will they make top 4? That I'm less confident in, but it's been such an odd Bundesliga season, so I wouldn't rule it out at this point.
Well, what I do wonder is how Dortmund will play once the quote-unquote English weeks are over, with the Champions League campaign coming to a close, and obviously there are no midweek cup games anymore for Dortmund, or anyone else for that matter now. That is sort of my only question of that is at all going to head this team, because we did talk about their fitness shortcomings previously. But I actually have one question I wanted to briefly discuss. Lars, we've seen, I don't know exactly how many weeks or months it's now been since Kovac took over. But nevertheless, I wanted to ask you if you now currently think that it was the right decision to go with Niko Kovac instead of holding on to Nuri Sahin.
I don't think that's the question. I think letting go of Sahin was inevitable and something they did too late, as we talked about quite a few times on this show. I think
well, you could have said, well, in hindsight, I'd rather would have held on to Nuri Sahin.
Yeah, but
something you could say.
You would be incredibly wrong. But yes, you could say that, I suppose. I think the more pertinent question is whether or not Niko Kovac was the right man for the job. I think, and I've tried to be consistent on this, or reasonably consistent. I think, for step one, he might be the right guy, righting the ship. I think if you look just beyond just the naked results, as it were, the performances, there is more consistency to them. I think defensively they've been just flat out better than in the weeks and months before Kovac took over. I think the attacking play is fairly simplistic, but if they took their chances better, we might still talk about an improvement, because I don't think actually creating scoring opportunities has been the biggest issue under Kovac, despite the attacking play being simplistic. So, step one, tick-ish, I suppose, but I still have strong doubts as to whether Niko Kovac is the right guy for a squad turnover in the summer, in the short summer after the Club World Cup, or even in the extra transfer window before then. I don't really see Niko Kovac being the person, or just the head coach, the football man to implement a clear-cut playing philosophy that people can identify with, that people want to be, or players want to be a part of, that's going to be exciting and sort of fulfill the wishes of the Dortmund public. So if it's about step two, I think Niko Kovac is probably not the right coach for Dortmund, but I can understand that for the most part they were worried about step one.
Fair enough. Now, Matthias, let's zoom out slightly more. Do you think Dortmund would be better off right now if Edin Terzic was still their coach instead of the Sahin/Kovac kerfuffle?
Ooh, good question. Would they be standing better in the league if Terzic would have been the manager instead of Nuri Sahin? I believe so. Sahin versus Terzic versus Kovac. That, I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. They made the decisions they made, or i.e. Terzic also was part of that decision-making process in terms of him saying, I also don't really want to do this anymore. At least that's how it's come across. Overall, I don't think it would have... Terzic alone versus now the Sahin-Kovac thing, I think maybe Dortmund would be a place or two higher in the league, but I don't think much higher. I think they may have progressed further in the cup. Maybe. So yeah, it's probably a wash.
I feel like Dortmund might have progressed further in the cup if they hadn't 8 billion injuries in that Wolfsburg game back then.
Very true. That was very bad timing.
But yeah, continue.
No, I mean, that's really it. I think probably in the aggregate, you're getting about the same.
Yep, it's just something that I'm wondering about every now and then, like how Terzic would have developed in this year, since there would have been a little bit more consistency in that position. But yeah, obviously very much of a hypothetical. But here's another one. Lars, we have seen a lot of rumors linking Jadon Sancho with a move back to Dortmund for a second time, I guess. Do you think this is at all realistic? I know people love these rumors, but do you think that Dortmund are somehow going to swap out, say, Jamie Gittins for Jadon Sancho next season? And if so, would that even make sense for the Black and Yellows?
I mean, the question is not only would that make sense for Dortmund, but you would kind of have to ask Jadon Sancho, is he willing to play for, I don't know, 40 cents on the dollar? Maybe even less than that, because quite obviously the contract he signed at Manchester United is not something he's going to get from Dortmund or presumably anyone else. Maybe Chelsea, I don't know. He hasn't really played too much under Maresca in the last few weeks. There's been reporting about Chelsea's buyout option. They also have the option to pay Man United for not having to exercise any options on Sancho. So I think they have to pay like £5 million to get rid of Sancho, basically, if we wanted to put it like that. So I think there's a decent chance Sancho is back on the market, because I don't see a way back at Manchester United, even though obviously Erik ten Hag no longer involved there. But I think the bridges have been burned, as it were. So I think he's probably going to be on the market. And then, given the fact that over his senior career, and I think Sancho turned 25 in March, so he's not a kid anymore, let's say. And in his senior career, the only place he's done anything of note is Borussia Dortmund. So from that perspective, I can understand why the connection has been made again. But unless he's willing to commit like the rest of his prime or whatever, so a 5-year contract for Dortmund appropriate money, and the transfer fee going to Manchester United is something that isn't prohibitive for Dortmund, who are going to struggle to get all their deals done that they need to get done in the summer, because they obviously will have to gain some money with, more likely than not having any Champions League money coming in next season. I think I just find it hard to believe that that set of circumstances is going to come into fruition. But I mean, obviously stranger things have happened, and I can believe if it was just down to what does Jadon Sancho want to do, I would guess that he wants to come back to Dortmund because it's the one place where he's been happy and played well. But again, I just don't really see all the stars aligning there. And then you also have to ask the question, is he still going to be the same player? I would argue that even his second stint, the loan stint last season, I think if we don't have any, yellow tinted glasses or whatever the saying is, I don't think we saw the Jadon Sancho that we saw the first time around. Obviously, he had a few good games, scored, important goals, for example, against Eindhoven in the Champions League, if memory serves, but it's not like he was the absolute difference maker that he had been the first time around. So I'm not sure what kind of player they would be getting, and even if Sancho was willing to forego, let's say, 65% of his wages at Manchester United, he would still be among the highest paid players at Dortmund, or have a lot of attention focused on his person. And I don't know that necessarily his level of play he's shown ever since leaving Dortmund for the first time, so that includes the loan stint last season, warrants that level of investment and attention that's going to one person.
Yeah, fair enough. I think that was a very educated answer, to be honest, and I agree with pretty much every point you just said, and I don't know if I would like to have Jadon Sancho back. especially without the Marco Reus connection, to be honest, because I thought that was a sort of a special chemistry that Dortmund could utilize that I'm not sure he can utilize with other Dortmund players as well as he did with Reus. So there's that. Matthias, do you have any closing remarks for episode 500?
Aside from that, it's been an absolute privilege and joy to be doing this for 500 episodes. I know I've missed some, but overall, it's been a lot of fun. Even in the bad, frustrating, annoying times and seasons, which overall we haven't had as many, but there are a few, and this is probably the most of any of them. It's been an absolute blast.
Closing remarks?
Yeah, I mean, I remember my first episode quite vividly, actually. That was one of the very few we did on a Tuesday evening. And I was struggling to get home during an absolute thunderbastard of a storm in Germany. Train services not working at all, and frantically sending messages to Stefan, apologizing profusely, because at that point we had standards at this podcast, and when we set a date, we used to do it. Obviously, we've all chilled out a bit, and life takes its toll, I suppose. I mean, I don't even really remember when that was, which number or whatever. But to be honest, I basically owe my entire career to the Yellowwallpod, because I wouldn't have been picked up as a Dortmund columnist for Bleacher Report back in the day if I didn't write blogs on our website, which that should tell people how long ago that was, because obviously we haven't posted anything in years. So yeah, I'm very grateful, especially to you, Stefan, because if it wasn't for you giving me a random chance back in the day because I wrote stuff that you liked on Twitter, I don't know what I'd be doing for a job these days. And obviously the podcast sometimes sadly has to take a bit of a step into the second row in terms of our priorities, because we are now all part of the working population, and you are married, Matthias has kids and all that good stuff. Sometimes we don't find the time, but at least from my perspective, every time I open the laptop and go to Audacity and wait for your signal, I still get a kick out of it. I still think it's neat that we have a listenership, so long may it continue.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, if you talk about the opportunities the Yellowwallpod gave you, I mean, I can more or less say the same. If we hadn't invited Uli Hesse for, I don't know, was it episode 100 or so? I can't even remember which one it was.
Yeah, it was the 100th episode.
But I then met him at the Westfalenstadion where he had a reading later on, and this is sort of my origin story of him asking me if I could write in English, and I'm how old was I? 22, 21? I don't know, but I just basically said yes, and this is sort of how the ESPN column came about, and sort of really started my career, and obviously my current wife, and the reason why I live in Philadelphia. She is also a former listener. Now she doesn't listen to the show anymore because she hears me yapping all day, every day anyway. But this is sort of also a part of how and why we met, to be honest. So the Yellowwallpod in many ways for us was very life-changing. So I would not miss this for the world. And honestly, I've done a lot of things consistently in my life, but doing the Yellowwallpod for, correct me if I'm wrong, Matthias, now 13 years, I think is one of the biggest consistencies overall. So even if Borussia Dortmund did not win as many titles as we had hoped in that time, and I sometimes do wonder if we stop, do they start winning again? Are we the jinx? I don't know. But either way, it is very great. Also, all the amazing guests we have had on and the amazing interactions we've had with our fans and listeners have been absolutely fantastic, and just such a joy. And yeah, I think honestly, this is probably, we have had more than 500 episodes if you think about all the Borussia Dortmund fans from around the world episodes we did back in the day that didn't count to the episode count. So yeah, we're probably way over 500. And if you look at the great stint of the BVB update or whatever it was that I did on YouTube, so yeah, a lot of content, a lot of great writing. And yeah, I think we have to bring some of the previous panels back. I think Konstantin needs to make a return soon. I'm already in contact with Archie, bringing him back for an episode. So yeah, we'll see. I don't know if we can get a hold of Luca Giel. And I'm wondering what Lewis Ambrose is doing right now. I think he is a kid nowadays too. But yeah, and of course the OG Matthew Jarrett. Shout out to him. But anyway, as always, everyone out there, thank you for listening, and we'll be back next time. Until then, have a great week.